one of the things that we talk about a lot is the idea of building a culture of falling on your sword. One of the things that I hate is uncomfortable conversations and difficult conversations. I'm still work in progress on how to have those better. But I really thought for myself as a leader, how do I just avoid ever having to have those? Like, what can I do to change kind of the cycle of how we work as a team? And what we do is we talk about openly owning your mistakes, right? Bonus points for falling on your sword, big and little things. We'll celebrate that. And I'll say, you know what? I'm sure other people on our team have made that same mistake. Like, would you be open to sharing? Could you talk about that in our Slack channel? And then celebrating that. So not only am I sharing it, but I'm celebrating the fact that we're openly talking about it, that we know we made a mistake. I know we're going to make 100 more this week. It's going to happen all day long. Thank God that we're not curing cancer or doing surgery here. Like, bring it on. What I care the most about is that hopefully that mistake doesn't happen again, right? The principle here is to learn from that mistake, and how do we make sure it doesn't occur again?
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the Revenue Intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview. Or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for.
Sam, I am ecstatic. I'm excited to reconnect with you because it has been years since we worked together back at On24 at what was my second, the second stop of my sales career. And I had always looked up to you because, Sam, you were breaking records, getting all these trophies, and just like absolutely a phenomenal human being and salesperson. And so when we got reconnected for this podcast, I've been looking forward to it all week. So thank you for hanging out with me.
Thanks for having me. I feel like people always smile when we say this person knew me when I was baby Sam. So if I say I knew Devin when he was baby Devin before all the grand glory of Gong, people are like, what? So stoked to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yes. Back in the day, when I was just getting started, didn't know much, but I knew Sam did, and so I know you've learned a ton since then, and you've had quite a journey. So maybe for folks who just kind of maybe like the quick background, right? So you were at On24 for, I want to say 10 years, but that's just like completely abstract. I don't know if is that true.
6 years, but I sold their technology for 10, so at another company before that. So it feels like even longer.
Okay, nice. And then you said you jumped over to LinkedIn for a little while. What were you doing there?
Yeah, so I got pulled over to LinkedIn for being so active on the platform and such a proponent of the LinkedIn Sales Navigator platform. And so I led enterprise sales there, net new enterprise sales for about 19 months before Sam Sales launched.
Nice. And so every time we change careers as salespeople, not careers, but companies, it feels like a leap, right? But then you took a much larger leap and you went from LinkedIn and you founded #Sam Sales, where now you've got 38,000 followers on LinkedIn. You do guest lectures. You're on LinkedIn all the time. I see that. And you advise an impressive list of companies. So I'm curious, like, what was that leap like, or maybe even to start, like, why that leap? What motivated you to make that change?
I think a lot of people get into sales for a little while and then they're like, oh, I'm just going to go and consult. We hire consultants. I see how much they make. I'm going to go do that. Yeah. I think for me, I always had the entrepreneurial bug, but I never had the guts to do it. I always thought, like, could I do this? Should I do this? And then I just stagnated for a long time. At LinkedIn, I think it was breaking, I don't even remember what number record I had broken in my career. And I thought, every single year, I set the bar a little bit higher for myself, or, I overachieve and then the company sets the bar a little bit higher. We know how that goes in sales. And I always crushed it, right? Every single time without fail. And so I was like, I wonder what I could do on my own. I wonder what kind of impact I could make if I went out on my own. And talk about the ultimate sales challenge, selling yourself. And talk about the scariest as well, right? I don't have a product to hide behind. Somebody's not saying no to On24, not saying no to LinkedIn. They're saying no to Sam. We don't want to work with you. And you're like, ooh. But I thought, let me give this a shot, right? So I gave myself some runway, what I wanted to do financially, what success looked like. And then I just held my breath and jumped off the high dive.
Well, it seems to have paid off. And I know those leaps are always extremely scary in the moment. And then now, people probably look back and go, Sam, how could you have been scared? Of course it like look at you now. Of course it was like kind of the obvious choice, but it never seems like it in the moment.
I know, and it's terrifying, and you wonder, I look back and think, what if I hadn't done this, right? Like, what if all of this success and excitement and experiences hadn't happened? But getting to run your own business and getting to positively impact so many different people and so many companies, other than just the one that you support, is truly a dream come true. I'm waiting to wake up.
Fantastic. And last thing on kind of hashtag Sam Sales, what's kind of your approach? What's kind of the like, why do people end up working with you, or what's kind of your sweet spot?
I think, one of the things that we hear is different across the board, but when people hire me to speak, one of the things that they always say is just different energy than the speakers that we've brought in. There's jokes, but also there's a lot of enthusiasm and tangible, practical things. So I think whether we're speaking, doing a keynote, or doing our trainings, everything that comes out has a different level of energy, excitement, stories to back up what we're teaching, but it's also super practical and tangible. So it's not like, let's go be in front of our clients more and let's be great social sellers. Like, that's great. How the hell do we do that, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
what's important for us to teach. And I think that that's what makes us so different there. Our approach also is mastering the foundations. You don't care if you were 22 and a brand new BDR, or if you were 72 and you were still selling as an AE, there's something that we can teach you and how to build your foundations better for prospecting, outbound messaging, discovery calls, you name it.
That's fantastic. That's great. And so, and I agree, there's a lot of what to do out there, right? It's kind of like you can kind of Google it and find out what you should be doing as a salesperson. It's the how that people really crave, right? Like, okay, how do I actually put this into play? And especially coming from someone with the real background, like, especially in sales, we have this like nose for like, we don't really take advice from people who haven't kind of been there and done that, because otherwise it's kind of fluffy. So like that's why, like I said, aside from being friends and reconnecting, I know that you have that background, and I'm really excited to hear what you can share with our audience today. And so I'd love to hear about these leadership principles, right? We were chatting before
Yeah.
this session, and there was a couple great things we could talk about, but you said that you have some leadership principles that you've developed, and I'd love to hear what they are.
Yeah, so I think, I got to give a speech on this recently, and it was so energizing to kind of share, leadership the Sam Sales way. I am no different than a lot of people, where I've had one or two people tell me that I'm the worst boss that they've ever had. And then I've had the rest of them be like, you're the most inspiring boss I've ever had. I would
Yeah.
walk through fire to work for you again. And so it just made me start to think, like, what is it that's unique about me, my style? What do I always hear, back from the people that are reporting to me? And how can I kind of help others learn that same thing? So I think one of the things we talked about was just the concept of small things, right? Like keeping track of the small things with the people that report to us. So if you are a frontline manager and you have, 6 or 7 or 8 direct reports, or even a second line manager, 4 or 5 reports, think about who those people are, and even who the people are that report to them. What kind of rep are they? What are they motivated by? How do they like to be recognized? People give me a hard time and say that I like to be recognized with a parade. Not everybody likes to be recognized that way. They don't want their name in lights. They don't want to be on a leaderboard, right? Even if they're a top
Yeah.
performer, they like to be a little bit more undercover. So
Yeah.
thinking not only about that, but then everything else that's going on in their lives, right? So, who's their partner? Who's their spouse? What is their family like? Do they have dogs? Where do they live? Where do they aspire to go? What do they want to buy? If they hit goal
Yeah.
this year. One of our former coworkers, Jason Darling, if you remember that name, was like, I aspire to
Yeah.
buy a John boat, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell that is, but I'll remember that you want to buy a John boat, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do, which probably sounds a little creepy, but I keep a book of all of these facts. So we talked about like the little black book of client facts and employee facts. So when they tell me something, their kids' names, their pets' names, whatever, I'm writing that down, and it just gives me an opportunity to learn who they are, or at least pretend like I know these things and they're memorized until they actually are memorized.
Okay, you read I grabbed a piece of paper for some notes because there's a few things I want to dive into, but and you already answered my first question was like, do you write all that down? Because I feel like I would have to, and I actually, in my own leadership, I've started writing it down in kind of like, I have like a shared one-on-one doc that like me, the person that reports to me, like, we write notes there and we plan, and then I have one for myself. Do you have something in
Yeah.
where I write stuff like this down and kind of refer to? Is that kind of the process that you have as well?
Totally. I'm a weird stationery nerd. Like I love stationery and I love like notebooks and things like that. You know, like when you give out the notebook swag, I'm like, yes, I'm all excited about that. Whereas everyone like leaves it behind. I steal all of theirs.
Yeah.
But I love that too. And I keep that in a variety of ways. So like about the people individually, right? But then I also have some things that I always know about people, like their dog's names. So we have like literally a page for client dog names. And so I'll quickly thumb to that before we get on with the client. See, Saltine, this is this person's dog name. Okay, how's Saltine doing? Is that Saltine in the background? The person's like, oh my God, I can't believe you remember that. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're welcome. So just write that stuff down, right? We want to know it. It's important stuff. There's only so much room in my head though. So just keeping it down in whatever format works for you. Google Sheet or otherwise is a great start.
I want to go back to the celebrating part because I know,
Yeah.
you know this firsthand. There's two things that I think big assumptions about salespeople. Money is the main and probably and kind of exclusively only thing that makes them happy, and they all want to be on, the big what is it, Broadway show lights, right? They want to be in the star and all that.
Yeah.
I think that's a gross, misrepresentation, because there's obviously
Totally.
multiple types of people that can be successful in sales. And I've struggled with this because I don't mind the spotlight. I don't need to be in the spotlight, but I like a quick flash. Good job, Devin, and then I can go back to my day, right? I like a little top of the
Yep.
leaderboard. Oops, is that me up there? Oh, I didn't. Oh, okay.
Oh
But there's
wow. Wow, how odd.
Oh, how'd that get there? But then there's folks to your point that like they want to be successful, but they don't need their name at the top of the leaderboard. They're right. They don't want to be shouted out in front of all hands of 150 sales reps. That makes them
Yeah.
uncomfortable. So,
Yeah.
what's kind of your playbook for those folks? And I think there's
Yeah.
2 points. One is how do you identify it, other than just making them grossly uncomfortable and then learning the hard way. And then two, how do you celebrate them instead in the way that makes them, motivated and feel valued?
So I've got some cool stories for you here. So one, I just like to flat out ask them. And this is where I think as a leader, one of the most valuable things we can have is vulnerability. And I'll put in vulnerability with a little bit of self-deprecating humor, right? So I'll tell that
Mm.
person, a new rep on my team, tell me a little bit about how you like to get recognized. I am akin to Tinkerbell. I need applause to survive. For any parents out there that know that about Tinkerbell,
Yeah.
I would love a parade every time, I just managed to get out of bed every morning to be celebrated for that. But tell me a little bit about how you like to be recognized. So that person can share that with me. If they don't like their name in lights, right? Or if they just like to, I don't want to brag about it. I'd love for, your boss, Sam, to know that I'm doing a great job. I'll take note of that, right? And I can send a private email to just say, let me celebrate what this person is doing. But I think the other thing is just thinking about how do we celebrate them around what's important to them. So we have somebody, eons ago that was on our team that like killed for an Hermes bracelet. It's like a $600 bracelet. This is the thing that she wanted more than anything in her life and would never cough up the money, no matter how much she made to do it. She just couldn't stomach it. So when she did something just phenomenal, record breaking, we bought her an Hermes bracelet and we just said
Very
like,
cool.
kudos to you. So we paid attention to that.
Yeah.
If we don't have that lovely expense budget or if we don't want to spend it ourselves, right, if it's coming out of our pocket, think about this. So one of my reps was really, really close to her family. Thick as thieves. They were on group text all the time. I mean, they were buddies, right? The kind of family you kill to have for.
Right.
And when she got promoted, we did this really cool thing. So I basically took her into the room for her one-on-one, but I secretly had her family. It was like blue jeans back then. I had her family on blue jeans. So the camera was off, the whole 9 yards. I had IT come in the room, pretend that they needed something while we were doing our
Oh,
one-on-one. So he comes in, he's like, can I, bother you for a second? I'm like, can you believe this guy? We're in the middle of our one-on-one. And then flips on the blue jeans and she like looks over and she was like, what's happening? And then her family's like, you're getting promoted.
oh
And just
wow.
like, right? Like what an awesome experience. So just
Yeah.
thinking about those kind of grand gestures, like I think we have a responsibility, not only to guide and help our people grow, but we have an opportunity to create exceptional experiences for them, right? That's how you become a talent magnet. That's how you
Right.
get people who are like, I never want to work for anyone else in my life again.
That's fantastic. I got a little I wouldn't say a tear in my eye, but like a
A little
glisten,
choked up.
little like, I'm a dad now, so I'm way more emotional than I used to be. Uh
Oh, this is
yeah.
how I'm going to advertise this webinar. How Sam made Devin Reed cry.
Yeah, there's like one. You turn the faucet a little bit more, and you might see it. But no, that's a really cool story, and I do love those above and beyond stories, unprompted, right? Like
Oh,
going, you're already promoting someone. How can we make this extra special? And the
heck
thing I
yeah.
like a lot, and I agree that it's true. I don't think it's exclusively true, but when people say, oh, they don't quit, people don't quit their company, they quit their boss. That is
Yeah.
true to a degree. It's not
I
the only reason, obviously,
But
but
you think about that, right? Like you and I share the exceptional experience of having worked for On24 before, which is a delightful company. But if you have a boss, right, that really impacts you, right, even if you've got culture that isn't great organization wide, but you've got a boss who fights for you, who sticks up for you, who has a spine, who
yeah,
tries to shield you from the things that are coming down, right, and really make your time at that organization better, you'll keep those people, right? So not, yes, some places don't have great cultures, right? But if you've got a great boss, that can make the difference. Imagine having an incredible culture and an incredible leader. Those people stay forever.
that's yeah, absolutely, and it's like you said earlier, it's a talent magnet because now it's not just, oh, I like working for this company. It's, I love working for Sam. Like you'll Devin, you got to come over here. Like you're gonna love it over here, and it's like, why? You're not gonna believe what Sam did when I got promoted, right? With that one story,
Yeah.
someone's gonna go, oh, I definitely want to go work there. Or at least want to go talk to Sam or that leader.
Totally. And think about this too, like for you as leaders who are looking to eventually make a job change, right? You want to get promoted, you want to leave your organization, you're going to move, you're going to do something different, right? You want to change verticals. When you go through that interview process, one of the questions they should be asking you, if they're smart, is tell us about how you attract talent. How are you going to recruit for our team? So if you come saying, I have a bench of people, of top performers that would walk through fire to work for me. You probably remember Lee Cohen from On24, right?
Yeah.
Every time I think about the opportunity to work for Lee, right? He was the officiant at my wedding for crying
Oh
out loud.
wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's full circle. But when I think about getting to work for someone like Lee, and I think about all the other top performers we had there, right? Like the Katie O'Rourke's and the Jen Bazels and all those people who would just drop everything at the chance to work for a leader like that, the impact that can make for you to get hired above the competition could be huge.
100%. 100%. Okay, I like it. So the first principle is remember all the small things. I'm taking some quick notes for folks. Grand gestures when appropriate. Obviously, we're not rolling parades out for everybody. Be mindful of that. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
And know the little facts and feel free to put it into a notebook. It's not weird. That was my kind of thought. I was like, is it weird that I'm taking like notes? Like
It's
I have
not
like a
creepy.
CRM on people, but I'm like, no, it's because I care. So forgive me. Okay, Sam, what's pillar number two?
Pillar number two. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is the idea of building a culture of falling on your sword. So this is interesting, right? Think about this as leaders. How often you've had conversations with reps who are defensive, they're not forthcoming with their mistakes, or even if you're like, hey, like I want to talk about something, I think we could have done this better, and they say, no problem, you got it, okay, and you're like, ugh, right? Like you're probably even getting a little bit of a lump in your stomach now just thinking about those experiences. So one of the things that I hate is uncomfortable conversations and difficult conversations. I'm still work in progress on how to have those better. But I really thought for myself as a leader, how do I just avoid ever having to have those? Like, what can I do to change kind of the cycle of how we work as a team? And what we do is we talk about openly owning your mistakes, right? Bonus points for falling on your sword, big and little things. And what I love about this is that number one, it starts with us. So we have to be vulnerable. We have to own up to our issues and our errors and actively talk about that, because that's the first thing that we do to create psychological safety for the people that report to us that say, well, if she's admitting to mistakes, I
Right.
can do that too, right? Like, got it. It's not enough to just say to do it. You've got to do it too. So again, always vulnerable. I love self-deprecating humor. I'll walk through fire to make somebody laugh. So especially if it's to make fun of myself, like I'm here for it. So it starts with that, right? But let's say we take the first person who shares an example and says like, here's a mistake I made this week, or hey, I want to talk to you about something and own up to something that happened. We'll celebrate that. And I'll say, you know what? I'm sure other people on our team have made that same mistake. Like, would you be open to sharing? Could you talk about that in our Slack channel? And then celebrating that. So not only am I sharing it, but I'm celebrating the fact that we're openly talking about it, that we know we made a mistake. I know we're going to make 100 more this week. It's going to happen all day long. Thank God that we're not curing cancer or doing surgery here. Like, bring it on. What I care the most about is that hopefully that mistake doesn't happen again, right? The principle here is to learn from that mistake, and how do we make sure it doesn't occur again. Lots more to talk about there, but yeah, I think it's huge, right, to feel comfort in being able to do that.
Could not agree more. It's something you notice in it's not just in sales. We just spent time together in sales, and not necessarily at 24 on 24, but like the kind of leaders where like you think of like, do I feel comfortable approaching them? And sometimes that's a subconscious thought, right? You don't always walk like down the hall and like, am I comfortable walking into Sam's office right now and talking to her? No, the idea of talking to Sam either makes you feel really good or not. Like you said, that lump in your throat, where you're like, oh, not really.
Not so much.
Not so much, right? And when I did a lot of thinking about this when I entered my leadership role, was like, what are those things that make me really comfortable or really uncomfortable? And that's when it clicked, which is if the leader has admitted mistakes and how they own those mistakes, because then you don't feel, to your point, you don't feel uncomfortable bringing up yours. I think it's a Nelson Mandela quote, which is like, you either win or you learn. I tell my team, sometimes we win, sometimes we learn, and sometimes we do both. Once in a while, you actually do get to do both. But to your point, the learning part is like, we do weekly reviews for different campaigns and stuff. And it's like, I'll ask someone to specifically cover something that didn't go very well sometimes. And then position the team of like, hey, we're here to, this did not go as well as we planned. And sometimes it's mine. Sometimes I pick up the keyboard and it's like, oh, I bombed, didn't I? Let's talk about it. Let's see what I could have done better as a team. And then to your point, it opens up the door. So when other people make mistakes, they're like, oh, cool, I get a learning opportunity. I'm not going to feel guilt or shame or, get fired or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Like, I love this too, because we have so many different ways that we can talk about that, but I think we can also weave in humor. So this has to be authentic to your style, of course, right? But if you're humorous, if you're sarcastic, two things to share with you there. We've got the one, we're super mature at Sam Sales. So we've got an oopsie poopsie Slack channel where we share all of these things, right? So you guys do you, right? Be work appropriate for your environment, but just a great place to share that stuff. And sometimes we also share things like, really terrible sales emails that we get and things like that, just to kind of lighten the load of everything. I think the other thing, right, is thinking about how to build in that humor when something sort of disastrous happens. So I'll give you a good example. We just did a webinar today at Sam Sales. We do them once a month every Friday. And a couple months ago, we had gotten on the webinar and a few people started to come into the webinar. And the first person that came in was somebody named Dakota Tills. And I was like, Dakota Tills? Well, my head of marketing's last name is Tills and her dog's name is Dakota. And I was like, and so I let her in and I was like, Paige, what's up? And it was actually Adam Pash at postal.io. And he was like, oh, he's like, it's Adam at Postal. And I was like, oh, what? And then all of a sudden I saw Dakota Tills come in. So basically, if you know anything about webinars, you know that when you register for a webinar, you are cookied in the URL. And so Paige was just testing the webinar URL, then she got the confirmation, and she, unbeknownst to her, took her cookied URL with her dog's name in it and sent it to everybody, all 400 of our registrants for the webinar as a reminder. So about half of our crew was in as Dakota Tills. So she was mortified. It was a great story, but what we then did to make sure to really rub it in is we created a Zoom graphic with nothing but Dakota Tills, pictures of her dogs, and myself presenting on camera. We printed it, we framed it, and we mailed it to her, and she about died laughing. So again, you kind of build this culture, right, where we can give each other a hard time about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it always feels so terrible in the first hour. And then, a week later, it's like, it's really not that, you know what I mean? It's really not a big deal. I'm sure the webinar still happened, right? Like, it's more embarrassing than anything. But to your point, you can use humor and celebrate in a way where it's like, it's kind of like that nudge in the ribs. Like, yeah, you made an error, but it's all good because, again, you're building culture because we all make errors and we all celebrate that together. So that's great.
Totally. And I think, again, like everybody's in on it now and they talk about hashtag DakotaGate. So we've got that going for us as part of our brand.
That's great. Okay, well, we're rounding it out here and we have a third leadership pillar. So what is our third and final pillar of the day, Sam?
I'll talk about empathy. So I think empathy, we talk about this a lot, like it is a hot topic, especially now, and everything that we've gone through the last couple of years and everything that's happening in the news worldwide. But I think empathy is super key. And what I would say about empathy is that it's not enough to just say like, oh, I'm sorry, and then move on, right? Like I've had leaders who are, I'm like, hey, like something really tough is going on with me. And they're like, that's really tough to hear. Hey, what's your Q1 forecast? And I'm like, okay. Right. So the I'm sorry isn't enough. So I think, a couple of things here. One, empathy is listening, right? So being able to hear what's going on and then being what we're coaching our leaders and our reps to be, which is great active listeners. So are we listening to what's going on? Are we hearing the feedback? Are we asking for more information, right, to show that we're actively listening? And then are we also acting with EQ, using our EQ? Maybe somebody shares something awful that's going on. We show active listening and we're like, how did this happen? How long has it been happening? And this person says like, I don't really want to talk about it, or gives us a very short answer without more information. Then we use EQ to say, okay, this person doesn't want to think about it. Right. I think the other thing though is, right, like let's build a process of how we do this. So empathy to me isn't like for the life-changing things going on in people's lives. It's for the small things too. So don't just think, okay, like if they're getting a divorce, if their parents are going through cancer, whatever, right. Those are important. But let's also think about the smaller things, right? So a couple of quick examples. Someone on our team, terrible for her, but she lives in Hawaii, and all of her fans at her house went out, and they rely on trade winds to keep cool down there. So she has nothing to keep her cool, and she is super hot. She was complaining about it the other day, just miserable working conditions, and just making a note to ask her the next day or 2 days later, how's the fan situation? Did you get it, figured out? Just remembering that. And you guys, I can't remember that stuff. It's on my calendar. I'm literally like, Kim, fan. That's what I'm writing down so that I remember to ask. But right. Just asking makes a difference. Carol on our team, her son had COVID, and so she told us about it. She was really devastated. He was far away. He was, being typical, mom, I'm fine to her. And so again, just remembering 2 days later to check in, right? Putting that again on my calendar. But I'll say something really quick here that's important about knowing your reps and knowing the people's names, the names of the people in their lives. When I asked her how he was doing, I used his name, and that might seem so obvious to you guys, right? Of course I'm going to write my reps or my people's children's names, but I once got a bottle of champagne from a boss celebrating a huge deal that we'd won and worked for him for 16, 17 months. And the note said, something for you and your significant other to enjoy. And I'm like, his name is Ryan. You can listen, you can know that, you can write it down, or you can just take 2 seconds to ask my peers what his name is. So keep that in mind, right? If you don't know those things, write those down. And the final thing I'll say, on the empathy thing, again, just remembering kind of little gestures. Somebody on our team also lost their dad, really, really close to their dad, devastating loss to the family. So of course we sent flowers, but we threw that on her calendar for the 1-year anniversary. We also paid attention that she loves the Special Olympics, so she's a huge supporter of that. So come the 1-year anniversary, we'll make a $100 donation. It doesn't have to be big. It's just a gesture. And these things, just showing that you give a darn, I would use a different word otherwise, but that you give a darn about your people can go such a long way.
I totally agree. And it's those unprompted things, right? It could be like, we're kind of talking about like feedback, or whether it's these like above and beyond things. I love that. It's something I'm still practicing, candidly. But there's some good example where similar things, someone, we had like a freelancer who's a mom, and she, I think one of her kids got sick. I don't remember if it was COVID or not, but she had just started. She was really excited. She wanted to get her first project, going, and like right when she got her first brief, she's like, I'm out for at least a week. So I got 2 kids and 1's sick. And so the first response was like, well, let's just remove her from the project. That's the obvious thing. And like, we were kind of about to move on, and they were like, well, she's probably having a really tough time feeding those kids, because even if your kids aren't sick, that's a pain. So I was like, why don't we just like send her flowers and a DoorDash gift card just to make today a little bit easier? And she was so grateful, right? And like, she hadn't done a single bit of work for us yet, really, and it's like, but I guarantee like, that loyalty's there. And it's not that you do it just for the loyalty, right? It's you have to care about that person. And like you said, stop, have a moment to think about what does that really mean for him or him or her or they, of what they're really, what they're really going through.
Completely. And you nailed it, right? It's thinking about that person and what they're going through. Like, so let's pause instead of just think, how is this going to impact me, my goals, what I have to do? Like, yes, that matters, but let's think about that person first. And I think, that's kind of how I lead our organization. We have 14 women on our team, which is amazing. But, one just posted a couple weekends ago, unprompted on LinkedIn, and said, we talk about culture of falling on your sword. She vulnerably, publicly said, I've dropped the ball more than I'd like to in the last couple of weeks at Sam Sales. It's just not my MO. I owned up to it with Sam and said, this is this is how I'm feeling about things. And the first thing that she said was, what can I take off your plate? How can we get through this together? It wasn't like, you're right, you have dropped the ball, you need to clean your act up. She already knows that, right?
Yeah.
And when you build that culture of falling on your sword, like, there's absolutely no need to twist that knife further.
Right.
That person already knows and they're owning up to it.
Yeah.
But what can we do to make this better for you? Because if I just say, bust your bum, let's figure this out and move forward, I'm probably not going to hold on to her for very long. And I need her.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, this has been great, Sam. We've got 3 leadership principles. I'm going to recap for folks. You have remembering the small things about your team, number 1. Number 2, creating a culture of falling on your sword. It doesn't hurt as bad as it sounds, I promise. And 3, lead with empathy, with some great examples there. So I really appreciate that. I like interviewing you, even though it didn't feel like an interview, because all the little questions I had previously scheduled, like, you answered them in all of your answers. So I'm good on my end, and I think the listeners are too. But there's one question I ask folks, Sam, that is not on the list, but we ask all of our guests.
Oh boy.
It's not too hard though. How would you describe sales in one word?
It is the art of building relationships and solving challenges for people who are kind enough to give you their time.
There you go. I'm gonna put hyphens in there, so it's one word, but you passed in my book. Fantastic, Sam. I know you're on LinkedIn. That's where I would tell folks. Is there anywhere else that they can go or should go to follow you, get a hold of you, follow this journey? Where should they find you?
Yeah, you guys pop over to samsalesconsulting.com. You'll be able to sign up for our newsletter there. They're pretty funny. Paige with Dakota Gate puts together some really good content every single week, a couple of times. And come hang out with us either in our women's leadership group or our webinars on a monthly basis. We'd love to have you.
Fantastic. There you go, folks. You know where to go. Sam, thank you again for giving me some of your time on this Friday. Thanks for sharing your expertise with our listeners. And I hope it's not another 6 years until I see you again, because I really enjoyed this conversation.
Same here, Devin. Thanks for having me. So nice.
Talk to you later.